All right, guys, I just want to welcome back to the Gridiron Gurus podcast. Today, me and Nick are going to continue our 7-round mock draft series in the beginning of April here with the Chicago Bears. The first round selection late in this draft, they ended up just, potentially being a couple plays short of a championship game appearance. And the biggest flaw with this team last year was defense. They were very opportunistic, created a lot of turnovers and big plays when they needed them, but they struggled to get off the field for the most part and to play with urgency in first halves. And the run defense was incredibly poor throughout this season for the Bears. This is a team that I think can definitely look to easily upgrade in that department on the defensive line. And this draft is perfect, especially with the roster construction the way it's already at. They don't have a handful of needs, right? That's not deep in terms of what they need to improve on. So I think defensive tackle this year has got to be the selection at number 25 overall. They could even maybe trade back if they wanted to. But I think this is the only position that makes sense. It's the only one I've ever considered in my mock drafts, Nick, and Caden McDonald is going to fit that bill. This is a guy who's a phenomenal run defender, good at clogging gaps and taking on double teams, great anchor with some good strength, pretty good first step as well for his size. He does have limited pass rush moves, some average arm length, and he can look stiff in space at times. That's fine. I think that, again, makes it more of a good fit for him here in Chicago because they have a talented defensive line at the end of the day. They have some pass rushers, and this guy can come in and play his role to a T and not be asked to do other things that he's not good at. So I think McDonald's a good fit. I don't think he's the best defensive tackle in this class. I think a guy like Lee Hunter would make a lot of sense, maybe Caleb Banks as well. I like this one overall, though, Nick. And again, defensive tackle is the only option, in my opinion, for the Bears in the first round.
The Chicago Bears, the Arlington Heights Bears, maybe the Gary, Indiana Bears. There was one thing about this team last year was that they had a great offense, but they had a lackluster defense, and that defense constantly put them in holes that the offense had to dig them out of. They were constantly coming from behind. You saw it in the playoffs against the Packers. You saw it in the regular season all the time against the Packers as well in the regular season, against some of the other teams in the regular season, where they were constantly having to come back from down late in the games and fight their way back, and they were always seemed like they were on the back foot, and the defense was giving the other team opportunities to score early on, putting the offense in a bind. I think they have to address the defensive needs immediately in this draft, and this is a very talented draft to do so. Don't get me wrong, I like some of the players they have. I think Montez Sweat's a really solid player. I think TJ Edwards is pretty good as well. Tyreek Stevenson's not bad, but they got a lot of work to do. I think they need to add some pieces here and there. I think Caden McDonald is a really good starting piece. He was good for the Buckeyes last year. He was a big asset on that defensive line, had 4 sacks, 11 QB hurries last year, over 450 snaps. I think he's got really solid size. They were able to get him in the B gap a lot. They were able to move him to the A gap sometimes as well. He was productive for this team, 6'3", 230 pounds. He is an elite run defender. He is really solid against the run. He has a limited pass rush certainly, but I think he's really good against the run, high percentile run stopper who could really plug that hole and be a big body in the interior that has some flexibility. Again, you're not going to get a ton in the pass rush department, but I think he's going to be phenomenal against the run. He will clog those gaps and be a big difference maker in the A gap or the B gap, a huge solid piece to plug into a defensive line that I think the interior needs a little bit of help with some lackluster depth further down the depth chart. This could be a really strong add for the Bears. This is a talented prospect that can do a lot for this defense.
Now I move to day 2. They have 3 selections. Jack Golday at linebacker is a pretty good player. You've probably heard a lot. This guy, has been getting raved about throughout this entire process. Pretty impressive coverage defender. He does need some better consistency when it comes to his awareness and zone, but he has fluid hips and good length, takes on blocks with authority, good sideline speed, good wrap-up tackler in space. Overall, just a good football player. Can often get his eyes caught up in the backfield, though. The run defense instincts are subpar. So it's a guy that I think flying up draft boards probably shouldn't go this early, quite frankly, because he's a bit of a project. But with the Bears, linebacker's a need, but it's not the most pressing need in the world, more so into the future, maybe not so much in 2026. So this is a guy you can come in, coach up, and eventually put him into the starting lineup. So I think he makes sense for them. Malachi Lawrence, going pass rush here for the Bears could make a lot of sense. 35 sacks last year, it's below average when it comes to a number. I think Austin Booker's really good. You alluded to Montez Sweat as well. I just don't think they have ideal depth on this defensive line. So I think he's going to come over and he's going to do a lot of great things for whoever drafts him. He's an athletic freak, tested off the charts in Indianapolis. 4'5", 240, for example. Pretty impressive bend, good length, and I like the get-off speed. And then they had a shocking retirement. Drew Dahlman at center, he decided to hang it up after, his only season with the Bears. He got a big payday, and I think that was the goal for him, right? Just show up in the NFL for a couple years, get a big payday, then get out while you can and while your health is intact. So I think that's the case with him. Logan Jones out of Iowa, really good draftee, freak athlete as well, matched for great power, highly efficient in pass protection, understands leverage and has good hand placement. He's about 300 pounds, so maybe he could add some more weight to his frame. Length is definitely on the shorter side. A center coming from Iowa, Nick. I mean, how can you beat that? I think Logan Jones would be a great addition. Center is a top need for them. They might have to overdraft at that position to get who they want. If Jones is there at 89 overall, though, consider it done.
I think there's three really solid picks here. I think Jake Golday would be a good pick for this team. Obviously, a bit of a project player, like you alluded to, but he had some decent reps last year. 70 total tackles last year. He was solid in run defense at times. Definitely missed 10 tackles, which was a bit of a concern. Didn't really use him a whole lot in coverage. 6'4", 240 pounds. He has solid athleticism, good potential, but certainly needs to improve on some things. I think he could be a good depth piece. Obviously, maybe that's not exactly what you're looking for, taking him at pick 57, but he's a player that still has a lot of potential that I think you can really step up. That's a key word with him, is just potential, potential, potential. And I think he's a guy that you really like what you can do with that type of player. And I think this is a defense that needs to add more depth. And I think he's a player that you can count on him being a solid asset immediately for your defensive side of the ball. Malachi Lawrence, I think he's, again, a guy that's really good. He had 7 sacks last year, 30 QB hurries, 3 hits. He was able to get in the backfield early and often. I think he's really solid on the outside tackle position. I think he's really good on that defensive side of the ball. 470 snaps last year, about even split between pass rush and run defense snaps. So he's got good balance in that regard. 6'4", 250 pounds. I think he's a good rotational piece. You can play him at linebacker, maybe potentially as well. He's someone that's, again, another solid piece for this defensive line that needs some depth. He was able to get pressure on quarterbacks, and this is a team that needs to find a way to get pressure on the quarterback. They struggled in the sack department last year. They were able to let quarterbacks escape and go out and create things, which I think is something you want to avoid. Logan Jones, he's a pure center. He was really solid at Iowa last year, 766 snaps. He was good, only gave 1 sack and 2 QB hurries last season. He was good in run block and pass block. I think he has solid potential across the board. It's an Iowa offensive line piece. You're going to get high IQ, good football knowledge, someone that's just really good, strong athleticism, good hand usage as well. Some of the blocking may be a little bit of a challenge. I think you got to work on some of that, certainly sustaining some of those blocks against some of those tougher NFL pieces on the defensive side of the ball. But I think he would be a really good player with high football IQ and good hand usage. 6'3", 300 pounds. Definitely potentially, leaning into that overdraft area at 89 overall, I beg your pardon, but he's the 95th ranked player on the PFF big board, so certainly a guy that's maybe kind of in that range. And for that positional need, which is clearly a major need for the Bears, I don't think you mind overdrafting a little bit with a guy from a program that's known to put out really high-end pieces on the offensive line.
Now we move to day 3. Only a couple more selections for the Bears. I don't have a whole lot here to work with, but Bud Clark in the 4th round I think would make a lot of sense. This is his team that lost their 2 starting safeties and replaced them with 2 guys in free agency. So I think that's a positional group that playing time is going to be up for grabs. Clark, I love watching this guy play. True ball hawk, really thrives as a robber/patroller. Has pretty good size to match up with tight ends and man coverage as well. Good closing speed, and he can really jump routes downhill. So I think Clark's going to be a heck of an NFL player. And then you also have J. Michael Sturdivant, a wide receiver. I think this is a group that they have impressive players like Luther Burden, Colston Loveland. These 2 guys were phenomenal as young guys last year. And of course, they need some depth, right? So I think that's something with the DJ Moore trade that they're going to look to address, but they're not going to be over-aggressive in doing so. Michael Sturdivant, good blend of size and speed, can be used as a vertical threat. Also has some physical reps as an X. I think he's got some crisp footwork, so I think this is a high upside player. Of course, Romo Dunze being one of their top dogs in the receiver room. It's not the most pressing need in the world, but they definitely need to improve their depth long term for this offense. And then Devontae Smith at corner. Hasn't played that much in his career. He can spend time in the slot, can play out wide, but he was a pretty consistent player at Bama and at Notre Dame, even if it wasn't that many reps. So I think they could add him to the secondary as well. What do you think of these selections, Nick? Nothing really jumping off the page. I think Clark's a good player. What do you make of them going after a receiver, though?
I like the 3 picks here. I think this is a team that's contending for Super Bowl, contending for division titles. So I think they're really in a strong set in this roster, and they can kind of add some pieces, take a gamble on some guys in these later rounds to sort of add depth to positional groups. Bud Clark was really strong at the start of the season. He had a really good September, but kind of trailed off for TCU, didn't play so great in the second half of the season. and showed some inconsistencies. 725 defensive snaps last year, 42 tackles, had 9 missed tackles, but he was solid, a variety of different roles, played deep, played in the box, played some slot as well. So they're able to move him around and get a lot out of him. I think he's a player that really is solid overall, ranking right in that sort of 115 to 125 range on most boards. He's long, he's a pretty explosive playmaker, like you said, a ball hawk, so he'll certainly go up there and grab interceptions. I think he could really do a lot for this defense that could use, maybe another piece or two, nothing too crazy. And when you look at the J. Michael Sturdivant pick, this is someone that people might say, oh, that's not necessarily a need for the Bears. They have a pretty deep pass catching group, and they certainly do. I think Odunze and Burden are obviously really good key pieces. They have Loveland and Cole Kmet, who are two really solid pieces. Well, they signed Khalif Raymond from Detroit, but I think they could add a little bit of depth. And Sturdivant showed a lot of promise at UCLA and at Florida last year. He had 411 yards on 27 receptions, was targeted 50 times, so a little bit of inconsistency there. 3 touchdowns over that. He was pretty solid the year prior to that as well at times, had 600 yards in 2023 and 4 touchdowns. He's got good speed. I think the size on him is not bad either. At 6'2", 213, he's explosive, right? He's certainly good on the outside and has really solid three down play potential. Big athleticism, certainly a guy that can be a big difference maker. And again, I think this Bears team is a contender, and they have a really strong roster across the board, so they can add some pieces that maybe don't make a ton of sense on paper to put depth on their team. Devontae Smith, I thought he was good at Bama. I thought he was good at Notre Dame in his limited reps. Last year he showed some progress for that team, and I think he's a player that you can get a lot out of him in the slot. He kind of really is reliably just in the slot, but I think he's a good defensive player. Had about 300 defensive snaps last year. Had 418 the year before that. He's a player that, again, is worth the gamble. I think 5'11", 200 pounds, ranking about 250 on most big boards. Getting him in the 7th round I don't think is a bad play. This is a guy that played for 2 high-level programs, has good football IQ, and can certainly make an impact on the defensive side of the ball. Not a bad little add in the 7th round.
For today's episode, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.